So, so hello, I'm Kat,
And I'm Raz, and together we're Tandem Wow. So that's Tandem Women on Wheels.
and we broke the world record for being the fastest to circumnavigate the globe on a tandem. So the fastest ever. So the women's record, but the overall record as well. So we're just going to tell you about the trip, and we're not going to talk for very long with slides. We thought we'd just open up, as Andy said, for questions and just have a chat really. So get your questions ready, and we'll tell you a little bit, and then open up for questions.
Yeah, so we thought we'd just kind of tell you the nuts and bolts, really. Cycling around the world on a tandem's been done before, and it's been done by two lots of men in the past, John and George, who did it in 290 days, and then Lewis and Lloyd, who beat their record and did it in 181 days. And we were avid watchers of their blog and learnt a lot how not to do it in some cases. But yeah, we learnt a lot from them, and we were in contact with them, and they were incredibly supportive as we went around.
But we're pretty determined to beat their records, so
Set off, yeah. We 280 days was our aim.
Move the slide on. So hang on, there we go. So this is Alice. So this is our tandem. So we had our tandem custom built for the trip. You can probably see that on the frame there's like some silver like rings on the frame. They're actually couplings, and we can take Alice to bits, which because we did actually have to fly over certain countries as part of the route. So we did have to take her into two bits and pack her up in boxes and fly with her, which is quite nerve-wracking actually, because we were just hopeful that she'd arrive in the parts, in two bits, as it were, at the other end. But she's got a steel frame. The reason for that, because a lot of people think, you want a light carbon bike, but the truth is that that's probably going to break, particularly on some of the roads that we were traveling on. So you need something that you can fix. So she's got a steel frame, and she's got particularly sturdy wheels. So there's 48 spokes on those wheels, which mean that they were pretty solid. Disc brake and the third brake as well on the back, because when she's fully laden, and you'll see some shots of her with all the baggage on, it's pretty heavy. So when we were crossing the Nullarbor, and we'll tell you a bit about the Nullarbor, that's a desert in Australia, with all the water on and with us on and our bags on, she was something like 200 kilograms, which is actually quite heavy when you're going into a headwind.
It was a bit of a headwind all the way across the Nullarbor, that's for sure. So we applied to Guinness in the first instance, and we do know differently now, but we didn't at the time, and it just felt like Guinness, the Guinness World Records, was run by one man called Malcolm in a little booth and a tank top, because every time we'd email, there was nothing, no reply. So you'd email into a little chat box, and then you'd wait 12 weeks for a reply. So you didn't know whether it's the correct kind of chat box, or if you're putting the right information in or asking the right questions, because every time it took months for them to reply. And finally, they did. And our challenge was accepted, and I'd worded it slightly differently, but this is the fastest circumnavigation by tandem bicycle female. That was, so there is the male record, obviously. And these were the rules. We had pages of rules, but in a nutshell, you had to use the same bike throughout. So you could change parts on it, but the bike had to stay the same. It was an unsupported journey, so you couldn't have, I suppose you could have had a support vehicle, but it had to be 5 bike lengths, and anybody riding with us couldn't, they could kind of draft us, but there's no way we could ever draft any other cyclist. They had to be quite a length away from us. Kat, well, she'll tell you about the route, but we had to submit that prior to the attempt and for them to actually accept it. And that was a real challenge, because trying to put the route into the chat box, not knowing whether we'd done the right thing, waiting for the reply, was a bit of a nerve-wracking thing. And the best bit is, well, that I quite like, is it had to have the same two cyclists, because I'm sure Kat would have got a bit bored of me halfway around and swapped bikes, the stoker, but you actually had to keep the same people for the whole journey, which I was quite pleased about. You had to use the same start and finish point, which we were outside Beeline on that little grass patch there. And I was just telling Andy, actually, Becky, who you probably all know, was our official timekeeper. So she was there on the clock when we started and when we finished, which was really lovely. And we had to go in the same direction. So you go from east to west or west to east, but it has to be continual in the same direction. And if you were to back up on yourself, those miles don't actually count. But what we didn't know is how much, and so there's some parts going down Asia, for example, where we did a little curve in, and we didn't really know until the end whether they'd accept those miles, but they did. And I will tell you about some of the that they say you must keep the tickets and the start time and end point, and I'll tell you a little bit about the evidence we had to keep in a minute. But the distance had to be 18,000 miles, which is, Kat will show you, it's quite difficult to get that amount of miles so we took some working out. But those were the rules. Oh, there's more rules. No, those were the rules.
How many rules are there? That's the same, right? Yeah.
We've done that.
Route. Okay, the route. We'll talk about the route. So as Raz was saying, we had to submit our route to Guinness. So we had to think very carefully about which way we were going to go and how we were going to do it. So we went east. The reason for going east is the wind actually comes from the west. So the prevailing winds around the world come from the west. So you've got a better chance of having a tailwind if you go that way, though it, to be really did not feel like that. It felt in certain areas that you were just going against the wind all the time, including in Australia, where we had a headwind all the way across Australia. So we rode between 80 and 100 miles a day, because we had some days when we had to stop for mechanicals, or we had to fly between various countries. It meant that we averaged, for all the days that we were out there, we averaged 70 miles a day. That included any days off but we had very, very few of those. And we had a few flights. And originally we planned to have 1 day a week off, but it didn't actually work out that. We just rode practically every day. So I'll show you the route. So we set off from Oxford, and we went across France. So we headed south. We set off in that heat wave. I don't know if you remember it, but in 2019 there was a bit of a heat wave, and it was something like 35 degrees in the centre of France. And we rode through that, and we hit the coast and went through into Italy, and then we went down the Croatian coast. You can see that we went through Slovenia, went through Bosnia, but effectively into Croatia, then Macedonia, and then we went through Albania, and Montenegro, then Albania, then Macedonia, then into Greece, and then from Greece we headed into Turkey and to Istanbul, and then from Istanbul we crossed the Bosphorus, and then we're in Asia. So we left Europe behind, and we followed the Black Sea into Georgia, and finished in Tbilisi, and that's where we took our first flight, and we flew to India. We flew to Mumbai in India, and we rode around the coast of India. So from Mumbai, following the coast to Calcutta. And then we went over the border into Myanmar, which I don't think we would be able to, not that we'd be able to travel at all at the moment, but we certainly wouldn't be able to travel through Myanmar at the moment with the military coup that's just happened there. But we cycled from Mandalay sort of down towards Yangon and then over the border into Thailand. Then we went through Thailand into Malaysia, through Kuala Lumpur, and then finished that stage in Singapore. And then from Singapore, we took a flight to Australia, and we cycled from Perth to Brisbane. And it was a time that the fires were raging in Australia, so we had to change our route a little bit and travel inland, which made it pretty challenging. So we went through an area of drought that was 45 degrees and hadn't rained for 3 years, so that was, and covered in flies, so that was pretty hot. And then from there we took a flight to New Zealand, and then we rode from Queenstown in New Zealand up to all the way up to Auckland, so from the South Island to the North Island. Then we took another flight to the States, to San Francisco. We cycled down the coast to just south of Los Angeles, and then we went across the States, sort of following the wall. So Trump's wall along the Mexican border. We had 1 day in Mexico. We just went over the border, which was the most difficult border crossing, getting back actually from from Mexico into the States. And then we ended up in Miami. So we finished in Miami. Then we flew to Morocco. Well, actually, we went to the coast. We went to Casablanca, and then travelled up through Gibraltar, and then up through Spain, over the Pyrenees, over the Sierra Nevada as well, through France, and up. And this was as the pandemic's chasing us. So there's some questions about that. We'll tell you all about that. But then the last day, which was sort of Southampton to Oxford, and that was a route, and that was 18,263 miles in total. So we went just over the 18,000, just have a few miles in the bank.
So the thing about Guinness is most of the records are kind of an hour long, possibly, or a few hours long, and they require a lot of evidence. But ours being so long, they still ask for the same amount of evidence. So we had to, this picture actually was my nephew made me this logbook for Christmas, and it's got leather with a world on it, which was lovely. And we used it as a statement book. So every day, every night, wherever we stayed, we had that signed and stamped, and people put comments in it. We had a GPS tracker, a spot, which broke, but we managed to get another one. But it kind of sent down spots every few miles, so people could follow us and track us on a kind of an hourly, minutely basis. We had to all the copies of the stamps in the passport, every ticket, and what isn't on there actually is every single receipt. That if we bought anything, we had to keep a receipt for every single item. We had to have photographs. We had to have 10-minute videos of each day, and all media, everything. And we very quickly realized that we couldn't keep all of this evidence all together. So fortunately, my brother was able to, and he did a really good job in collecting. We'd send him stuff, we'd scan everything, we'd send it to him, and he collated it. So every single day of the trip had every single one of those things. And we also had Wahoo, and we had Strava. So he took screenshots of those. So every single day, there was a whole package of all that data. And Guinness actually said to us that they were blown away, and they were able, when we got back, it was surprisingly quick. It was, we knew within 2 weeks, because they had all the data that they were looking at and what the whole time, and we just had to upload some of the videos, which we weren't able to send. We uploaded them, and they told us and verified it, but it was under embargo for a kind of, when was that? Till they launched their Guinness record book, which they used us to launch their book. So that's when they released the record, which was very nice. So we knew for a while, which was lovely. But when everybody asked, had he broken the record, and we just have to say, no, I don't know, and they would go, oh, I can't believe you don't know. But we did, but we kept it a secret. So yeah, so that kind of required a lot of organizing, but we did it. and yeah, could verify where we were every minute. Now I was looking today at the pictures, and I literally have thousands of pictures. And in order to kind of cut it short, as we went into 25 different countries, and I was thinking of a picture per country, but actually that was going to be too long. So I started, this is France. And Kat, what I was going to ask you is, when you see these pictures, what does that make you think? What is that? Thoughts?
I mean, I think I love the baguette in the at the back of the bike. So that's Alice actually fully laden, and you could see we've got all our kit there. We camped all the way across Europe, and so there's a tent and sleeping bags and goodness knows what, as well as obviously the baguette. But I mean, it was just so exciting setting off, because it was the first few days, and we'd been sort of itching to go, and it was beautiful, riding across France. Incredibly hot though, and actually very, quite hard work. I think we were going pretty hard at this point. We were covering a lot of miles, and but yeah, just really sort of happy memories of that exciting start.
And how few villages had cafes and things. There
So
was,
Raz,
yeah. This is, well, I was really excited. This is one of my most excited moments. We were approached Pisa, and of course you hear about this iconic thing, but I've never seen it before. And we literally turned a corner, and I said to Kat, "Where's?" And then that was right in front of us, and I was so excited. It was pouring down with rain and absolutely freezing, but it was so amazing to actually be there and see that. And a young girl took lots of photographs for us, and that was the one. There weren't many that actually got us and the tower in, but you can't quite see the top. But that was pretty good. And I think, Kat, I put that in for you in Venice.
yeah. So this is why we're still kind of on holiday, or it felt like it, because we'd ridden. It was still pretty early days, and this is in Venice, and we got to Venice. Sort of, it was towards the end of the day. We've been riding all day, and we actually decided to go to Venice, and we rode over the causeway, and there was this massive cruise liner in that sort of dwarfed the place. So it was quite a sort of an iconic scene, and the sun was setting, and it was just very, very beautiful. And we just sort of found a cafe and had a cup of coffee, and that's Alice on one of the bridges in Venice, and you can see how she's laden, I guess, on that shot as well. You can see all the kit that we had. Yeah, just really, really sort of happy memories.
And we did we pared everything down. We kind of got rid of anything that we didn't remotely need, and we could left that in France. And I put this in because this I just love, and I think one of the hardest, most challenging, most wonderful things we did was cycle across the Nullarbor Desert. And as Kat mentioned, there was a constant headwind, which you can't see it there, but it was just blowing. It was so bad that there was a couple in a kind of a big old, not a Land Rover, but kind of a Toyota thing with a box on the back, or so, caravan, that's what it was. And they kept stopping. We kept seeing them, and they were stopping, but they were saying it's so windy. We're using up so much petrol, we can't. It's so tiring driving into the wind. And we were going, really? Is that really so windy? So we saw them a lot because they couldn't. They actually got too tired driving into the wind. But yeah, I love the Nullarbor. So
Yeah. So and what you can't see here as well on the Nullarbor is the flies. So in Australia, it's just covered in flies. There's a lot of roadkill at the side of the road because the only moisture actually accumulates on the tarmac, and they have these massive road trains that go by every few minutes, because it's like the main road between Perth and Adelaide, and unfortunately there's lots of dead kangaroos and all sorts of things at the side of the road, and so as a consequence there's all these flies, and you're riding along and you're just covered in flies. I've never seen so many flies, and they're not like sort of UK flies, you know, where you kind of bat them away and they go. These flies just sort of hang on. They're under your glasses. They're in your mouth. They're just everywhere. And you, yeah, you can see, you can't really see that. But I think the other thing about the Nullarbor, yeah, was the distances. So I mean, it's something like 1,700 miles between Adelaide and Perth, and there's very sort of few places, certainly on the Nullarbor Desert, to stop. There's only a handful of roadhouses, so it's often like sort of 160-mile between where you could get any water and food. So we were doing quite long distances. We were doing, to try and jump between roadhouses so that we could get some food and potentially somewhere to stay. And obviously, water is pretty precious there as well. So yeah.
So as Andy mentioned earlier, we were raising money for Motor Neuron Disease Association and Oxfam. We aim to do 18,000 miles, and we wanted to raise £1 a mile, so 18,000. But we were really blown away by the community, and the M&D community and the Oxfam community really supported us incredibly well. And we did some days that we had as a dedicated day, so people could dedicate a day to somebody in celebration or in memory, and they could kind of buy the whole day. So between 80 and £100, they could have the whole day in memory of that person. And we listened to their music, and we, on our Facebook, we'd put a picture of them and kind of a dedication and things that the family or whoever had said we'd put up each day. And actually that was incredibly popular, and I had to remember all the days that people had decided, because they'd kind of set their hopes on that. But it was lovely, and it kind of some of them were harder for me to think about and write, because they were kind of, yeah, over the days approaching having to write something. I was kind of trying to mentally think about it. But yeah, it was a way we were surprised. We raised 40,000. That's including gift aid. So we're very happy about that. But what I do have to say is that those were all, not all, I mean, mostly very small, dedicated. They're not corporate lovely long big sums. There's thousands of people who actually dedicated lovely small amounts of money, and we're quite proud of that the amount of people that donated to us. That's so we thank them very much for that.
Yeah, and we did have a bit of help. Certainly, Stone and Goat, who a local sort of cycling clothing company, they provided us with some cycling kit, which was brilliant. JD Tandems really helped us with the bike, and we got some free tires from Schraub, and some discounts from some other organizations and things. But we pretty much funded it ourselves. So so we're on a bit of a budget, and that's hence a lot of the camping and things. So we did stay in places in Southeast Asia, mainly because it was the middle of the monsoon, and also in India you just get followed. So everywhere you go, you've got people following you on motorbikes and things, trying to take selfies, and every time you stop, you've got about 30 men standing around, sort of looking at you, which is obviously very flattering, but not really conducive for camping. So so we had a bit of help, but pretty much did it ourselves. So
actually, and in Lewis and Lloyd's blog, they actually had to get some of the guys out of their tent when they pitched it. Some of the Indian men were in their tent, and they had to get them out before they could get in. But you can follow us. What I have to say is Kat had discovered an incredible talent that neither of us knew she had, which was writing, creative writing. Well, not creative, I mean, but it was creative. So Kat wrote a daily blog, which when we set off, we hadn't intended to do that. I think that would have been just too much in our head to think of doing a daily blog. But she did a daily blog amazingly every single day, and it was always funny, and it was always very amusing, and it's still on our Facebook page, and it's on our website too. and I did the photographs and the videos, so we to kind of complement the day. And so there's that on our Facebook, but you can follow us on Strava, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on our website. All those addresses. It's easy to remember. It's Tandem Wow, Tandem Women on Wheels. And that picture's in Slovenia.
And I guess this. Oh yeah, that picture's in Slovenia. That picture's not in Slovenia. That picture's when we found out about that we got the world record, and we're in the book this year. That's a very bad picture of me with my ears, and fortunately my ears are flattened to my head with this headset. But you see they're standing out a little bit with that cap. But yeah, I don't know. You can probably just see there's a couple of pictures of us, and there's a bit of a write up. And they had to sort of hold the printing of the book to get our recording, because they wanted to go with it for the launch. And so we haven't got a massive 2-page spread, which my mum was very disappointed about, I must say. But we are in the book.
Page 158, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
and yeah, I mean that was it really. Don't know, Raz, if you wanted to say anything else, and then we'll just going to hand over to questions.
We'll hand back to Andy.
Yeah, well, goodness, thank you. We do get a flavour. I think your description of a headwind and impossible heat and huge flies. So you managed to get the sort of highs and lows very, very nicely there described. I mean, clearly the planning almost was a bigger thing than the trip itself, you know, so much you had to think about. But could you tell us a little bit about the mechanicals, the maintenance problems? Did you get punctures, or did you just keep changing the tires every few thousand miles, or you know, how preventive can you be?
So should I talk about that, Raz? So I guess yeah, I guess we did have some mechanicals. The most difficult mechanical we had was actually on the Nullarbor Desert, where we had a problem with, so tandems have like a timing chain that connects the front rider and the rear rider, so the pilot and the stoker, and it kept falling off. And the mechanism that enabled us to tighten it up had seized, and we couldn't shift it. It was a real problem, and we couldn't keep this train on. And so we ended up thinking, right, I'll shorten the chain, and then the chain was too short. And anyway, and then there was a problem with the chain wheel, because obviously well, not obviously, but part of the problem was that a rock had gone into it and it bent part of the chain. So anyway, this thing took 7 hours to fix, all in all, and it was. As I say, it was probably about 45 degrees, covered in flies, you know, sand everywhere, all in your sort of mechanism, trying to fix this thing at the side of the road. And we were about 4 or 5 days into Nullarbor, and the nearest bike shop was back in Perth. And I was beginning to think that, you know, we're going to have to go all the way back. And fortunately, we didn't, and we managed to fix it.
Gosh. Yes, I'd forgotten about.
I guess in terms of puncture.
So we had one day.
The worst puncture day. Sorry, there might be.
So one day the day we were going into Thailand, the road was really very poor, and we had 5 punctures, and they were mostly the back tire. So all the gear had to come off. We had to turn the bike upside down, take the wheel off. Yeah, 5 of them, and we were running really low on inner tubes, so kind of trying to fix those, and each inner tube was underneath a bed leg and seeing if we could fix them. But we actually realized that we probably bought a bit of a dodgy batch of Chinese. They weren't really very good quality, and they didn't last. We soon kind of corrected that, so yeah, kind of a mess really.
One of our audience, R&B, would like to ask question. Do you want to mute yourself and ask a
Yeah,
question?
sure. Thanks, Andy. So you mentioned at the beginning that you kind of ended up in kind of COVID restriction territory. What happened and how did that impact your trip?
Well, we'd heard about it and we kind of knew something was happening, but I think the beauty of cycling and cycling as we did is we didn't have to listen about Brexit forever, and we didn't have to listen about the whole pandemic thing. So we knew it was going on, obviously, but not in any great depth and detail until we really got to Spain. And there's somebody who was following us and asked us to stay with her, which was lovely. And we stayed in her apartment. Where was that, Kat? Just outside
Madrid.
Yeah, just outside Madrid. And as we left that morning, we aimed to leave about 8. We probably left about 8:30. We were cycling and she texted to say the whole of Madrid was under lockdown. And as we were going and leaving, they then started a cycle ban too. So you couldn't actually cycle. So we skidded out of there, fortunately got over the border into France. And I'll let Kat tell you about France.
So we're in France, and I mean, now it's becoming quite urgent, really, and we basically everything was starting to shut. So they'd started closing, hotels. There was nowhere we could eat during the day because they'd closed all the cafes and restaurants. So we were managing to, just to find some supermarkets that were still selling food and getting some food, we ended up not far from the coast, and we heard, because at this point we are actually paying attention to what's happening, and Macron made the announcement that from the next day they were imposing a travel ban, and so we ended up doing a sort of a mad dash to get to the coast, which we did actually take some public transport to get us there. We were very, very close, but by this stage we'd done over 18,000 miles, so we'd actually done the requisite mileage, which was the key, really. We got to the coast the day of the travel ban, and then we got the second to last passenger ferry out of France. Back into the UK, and we got back on the Wednesday, and the UK went into lockdown on the Monday. So we only just made it back on time. We were planning to get back that weekend, and we had a party planned and all of those sort of things. And in the end, we just had to get back, really, because it was, certainly if we'd have been on our original schedule, which was to just break the men's record by a day, we would have been locked down in Madrid. And that would have been very, very difficult for us to get out of Spain because of the, the cycle ban. And just fortunately, we're so far ahead of our target by that stage that we made it back.
And because of the quantity of calls to the ferry company at Caen, they very helpfully, there was an answer machine saying, due to the quantity of calls, we now have closed our telephone lines. So they weren't answering the email. So we had no idea. We were heading in one direction. We didn't actually know whether we'd get on the ferry or whether indeed there was a ferry. We didn't know anything. So we arrived and we were chatting at there were long car queues, and as Kat never stops for anybody, we cycled to the front of the queue. And they did say that there was a place on the ferry for Alice, which was great, so we knew she'd get across, but they didn't have any places for us. And we stood there, waited, and she said she went off and came back, and fortunately there were 2 places for us, so we actually got on with Alice, but we actually didn't know whether we would until we were on. And in the queue, there were lots of people that had come all the way from the south of France, knowing the travel ban and things, and had driven kind of 24 hours just to get to Caen to get over on the ferry. So it was a big dash, really, but we did it.
Yes. Tony Turton has a nice question. Tony, if you'd like to unmute. Oh.
Should we just answer it, and
Yeah, yeah.
read it in the chat? So Tony's asking about sort of long rides, and there tends to be sort of countries you enjoy riding in and countries that you don't. So which were the best and the worst? And I think for me, I really enjoyed riding in Myanmar, and that was partly because India had been so frenetic, particularly with every time we stopped, having a crowd of people standing around us, and which, as I say, was lovely, but became a bit kind of exhausting. And we got something like 25 selfie requests every day, and where you got over the border to Myanmar, and everybody was so calm and just really lovely, and there was tea shops, and not the sort of tea shops that we know, but places you could actually stop and get green tea and things, and it was just wonderful. And the worst for me was, even though it was incredibly beautiful, the drivers were just very, very aggressive in New Zealand. And the only place that, apart from a little bit on the Croatian coast, where I felt unsafe on the road was actually in New Zealand. And I'm the pilot, and so as the pilot, you do feel kind of responsible for everybody's safety, mine and obviously Raz's, and some of these drivers were just driving incredibly close and shouting abuse and things like that, and that was pretty disconcerting, actually.
I didn't expect either of those questions, so thanks, Tony, and sorry the sound went wrong. Alison, do you want to ask the...
I think Raz might have a view as well, though.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, please, Raz, do tell us your...
No. I mean, I think I'm inclined to agree with Kat. I thought, as I loved pretty much every country we went through. It was everywhere. Croatia was kind of really extraordinary, and I think Turkey, just driving into Istanbul was mad. And we saw an old Volvo, not a Volvo estate, but an old Volvo with a proper boot, and the boot was open, driving along with 5 children in the boot. I wasn't quick enough to get the camera out, but that it's just another world. And the tunnels in Turkey, cycling through some of those, where we actually celebrated our lives at the other end. I mean, they're very exciting once you come out of them, but absolutely terrifying when you go in and you're cycling for 3 kilometers. We're in the pitch black, and we kind of had lots of lights, and I had 2 lights, one light in either hand, and I was just waving them around my head and my back to kind of make people slightly notice us, and plus lights on the bike as well. But you could hear the rumbling at about 100 yards away, and it would just thunder onto you. Oh, it was absolutely terrifying. And in the middle of one of these very black long holes, we came across a Renault 5 that had broken down, and the kids had got out, and they only had their torches on their phones, and they were waving those, and these cars were thundering by, and we got stuck slightly behind it, of course, because we'd stopped behind it, and then trying to have to pull out to get round it. The whole thing was fairly hairy, but it was okay. We managed.
Alison.
Yeah, it was my question was about food and how you managed that, and were there days when you actually ended up starving, or did you always have a good backup supply in your bags? And also adding to that, water, because I just think it's clearly the logistics and the planning must have been formidable for you.
We always had water. Even the day we broke down in the Nullarbor overnight, we did actually have enough water, and that's partly because somebody stopped and gave us bottles, and I was being terribly polite to begin with the bottles, and they gave me 2 bottles, and I said, "Oh, thank you, that's lovely." And he said, "Do you want more?" I said, No, that's lovely." And he said, "No, have more and have more." So he gave us half a dozen, and actually we really needed those for that, through that, because you take enough. We had 12 liters each day that we kind of, because we wanted to have some safe, but we actually had about 18 liters, and we used all of that. But I think we went from coffee shop to coffee shop. We always had a very good supply of coffee. We had we did eat, and I don't think, and we also did carry a lot of snacks and nuts and dates and all sorts of things. So we were constantly eating, because the one thing you learn is that when you're running low, your energy levels just dip. So we did eat really, not well always, but we did eat. And I think there were some places in the world that the food, I don't think they know the meaning of fresh vegetables and fruit. But yeah, we did eat pretty well, I think, on the whole.
The worst place was actually the States.
Mm.
So the United States was the most difficult place to eat. And I know that doesn't sound, that maybe sounds a bit surprising, but in the middle of the States, they actually recognize as like a food desert. And the only food that's really available is sort of processed, kind of fast food. And we were also being sponsored to not go into McDonald's. So somebody was going to give £500 to our charities if we didn't go into McDonald's, and actually McDonald's in many of these places was the only place you could actually get any food, and so that became quite a challenge. And that person's name was taken in vain on a number of occasions.
Every time we saw a McDonald's, he was
which I couldn't possibly repeat what we were saying about him, because it was very impolite. But it was so that became really hard, and I suffered nutritionally actually in the States, where all the other countries we went in, particularly some of the developing countries, there's lots of markets where you can get fruit and things as you're going along, and so there's actually a kind of food is much more accessible. I mean, in India we did have to eat curry 3 times a day, which became a bit of a sort of an indigestion issue.
But, curries every day,
But the States was the worst place for me, and I did actually suffer a bit there.
Nick Green got a lovely question here about the movie. Nick, you want to ask, or if you've seen it?
Hello, Kat and Raz. Welcome.
Hey, Nick.
Welcome back. Only a year. Sorry to check things highbrow, but yes, when's the movie coming out, and who would you like to play you?
Dame Judi Dench could play Kat. I don't know. I think my children would say Claire Skinner. For me, the woman in Outnumbered, the mother in Outnumbered.
Well, we did have Susan Sarandon tweet in support of us, actually.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bit of a Thelma and Louise thing. So we didn't actually ride over a cliff at the end of it, but so maybe Susan Sarandon should play one of us. But
she's only 70.
I'm not posh enough for Judi Dench. You'd have to do the other posh one. You'd have to do Judi Dench.
Yeah, no, it's so funny.
I mean, you make it sound as if there really was no support and that you were on your own.
Yeah.
And I mean, that in itself is a challenge. And, as you were saying, you had to adjust the length of the chain and use your own initiative and you were miles away from anywhere there. And so you were having to buy spare inner tubes as you went along.
Yeah.
And did the same tyres last the whole way, or did you?
No. So we did have some spares. It was actually really difficult to get spare in India and Southeast Asia because the wheel sizes are different. So they have a 28-inch wheel, and so there's not many 700Cs, which is kind of a European sort of standard, and you get that in the Americas as well. But so it was quite difficult to get spares, and I mean we were going through tires, and we did actually have some shipped out to us, but we couldn't get them through customs, unfortunately, in time. So it was sort of it was a preview of Brexit and custom difficulties, so we couldn't actually get them out of customs in Turkey and in Georgia. It was the same with our cycling shorts as well, which meant that we went into Asia with holes in our cycling shorts, which didn't help the saddle sore in the monsoon for sure.
No, very sore bottoms.
Steve, your question: how do you keep your electronics charged? Do you want to enlarge on that, or is that?
Well, we had a solar panel. As long as that lasted, that broke. But actually, Kat is the queen of charging, and there is a charging regime you would not believe. Wherever we went, we kind of, even a cafe, anywhere, we'd be charging things. We also bought big battery chargers, which kept us going, and if we could get those charged, but Kat had such a regime, because some of them work better than others, and she seemed to have a bit of a thing going with that.
Yeah, I mean, we just, every opportunity to get anything charged, then you just would, because we were relying on, particularly the bike computers. We had Wahoos, and we had two on the bike, and then so we had to make sure that they were charged, and obviously, our phones and things like that, we did need them just in case anything went wrong. So we were, it was a constant thing to keep everything sort of charged up. But we
had a just reminded me of we had a luxury item. We could each take one luxury item. And Kat, what did you take as your luxury item?
I had a little mini espresso maker, which sounds very grand, but it's only like a tiny sort of little flask thing. But it just meant that we could actually pump out some espresso in the middle of the Nullarbor desert while being eaten alive by flies.
And I had a little mini Bose speaker that went on the handlebar, so we listened to podcasts and books and things. But that just reminded me, because that needed charging too. So I had a battery charger connected to that would charge, and then it would go onto my Wahoo. And but we had a little kind of our console on our handlebars that we charged everything that we could possibly do.
Did you think of using a dynamo to charge anything?
Yeah, we did, but you've got to reduce the number of spokes on your wheel in order to accommodate a dynamo. So because we decided to go for very robust wheels with 48 spokes, you can't actually fit a dynamo onto them. And plus the fact the dynamo, makes pedaling a bit harder, I think. So didn't want anything. So we didn't, but we did consider it.
Because from George and from Lewis and Lloyd's blog, one thing we learned, they bought their bike off the spec, off peg, and just cycled it. And they hadn't barely cycled before they cycled that, but their spokes just kept pinging, and I don't think they realized how important spokes were, so that if one or two went, they just left it until the next day when the wheel was buckled, and they had no end of trouble with their wheels and things. So Ruth and John, who had kind of from JD Tandems, they made sure our tires, we didn't have one spoke break, and our wheels were really good and true the whole time. So it was worth it. 48 spokes, definitely.
That leads us on to Ruth's question about training. Ruth, do you want to ask?
Yes, I wanted to ask about the training for this. What you did beforehand in the way of training, and then once you'd started, how did you manage to keep going? There must have been difficult days where you needed encouragement, and you felt, I can't face getting back on the bike. I should think most people would feel like that after a week.
I can honestly say there wasn't there was one day which I would have preferred to stay in bed on, but I had been sick all night long. But apart from that, there was not one day that I wasn't excited to get on the bike. When we were sore, it was kind of getting on the bike, and then it took about 10 minutes for your bottom to meld, kind of mold to the saddle a bit, and that was kind of, we were both going and then it kind of was okay. But I don't think there was any time that I just didn't want to ride. Really wanted to ride. What about you, Kat?
No, I mean it's kind of a funny story about the day that you were sick. I mean, obviously not funny in the
Hilarious.
sense that you were sick, but we were on the Big Sur, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful, but it was probably the hilliest day we were going to do in the States. And I don't know if you know the Big Sur, but it's the stretch of coastline between San Francisco and Los Angeles, and it is very, very beautiful, but quite mountainous, and lovely sort of coastal scenery and things. So beautiful. And anyway, and Raz had been throwing up all night, and I sort of said, look, we could stay in bed, or you can ride and just see how you feel, and if you're not feeling very well, we can come back, and
I knew,
etc. etc.
I knew you weren't going to.
So
Cat never turns around anywhere, not even around the roundabout. If there's anything, she does not go back. So I knew the minute I got on that bike, there was no stopping, and I was right. And it was the hilliest day. I thought I was pedaling really hard, but I couldn't eat any breakfast, and I clearly wasn't pedaling as hard as I can. We did actually have to stop so I could be sick as well on the side of the boat. But Cat on the hilliest day seemed to pedal us all the way up, all me, Alice, and all the gear, all by herself. But had you let me had a day in bed, I might have helped you slightly. Yeah, no.
Yeah, we didn't have many days off. So we rode across Australia with one day off, for where we stopped in Adelaide to fix the bike after that. We were telling you about that breakdown on the Nullarbor. We rode around India with one day off. We rode across the States with one day off. So we pretty much rode, every day. We had very, very few days off. The only time we actually really had any time was when we were waiting for a flight. So there was we were riding every day, and every day was great. It was a new adventure. We were obviously tired. It's because we were riding between 80 and 100 miles a day. I think maximum we did was about 120. So it was quite, obviously it's tiring. But it was fantastic, and you just didn't know what you're going to see or who you're going to meet, and we just did it.
And beforehand, had you been training on Alice for a few weeks, or to just get used to it? And Steve's question about the saddles, had you worn the saddles in beforehand, or everything was new?
Oh yeah.
I mean, they were new, but we had Alice quite a bit in. We'd taken, and so we'd been training in Europe a bit before we went. Yeah.
And Tony's.
Yeah. So don't get us wrong. It wasn't the first time we got on a bike. We did train, so we were riding things like the tap. So like a stage of the Tour de France in the mountains. We rode Liège Bastogne Liège. So we did some of the Spring Classics. We did, some training overseas. In the mountains. Some hard stuff. We rode, things like the struggle. Which is one of the tricky, very sort of hilly sportives in Yorkshire. We were doing a lot of riding, so it wasn't. It wasn't. Don't get us wrong. We didn't just. We just got we did a lot of training. Less training. Less training directly on the tandem, though we did some long rides on the tandem. Some long back to back days on the tandem. But we trained a lot on solos as well. So
we went out a lot with the Condors, the Colonel Condors. We're both members, so going out Nick and Jen cycling, and just kind of really. I don't think we could ever. I just thought, you know what? I'm never going to train enough. I'll get fit as I'm doing it. And but it was fine actually. It worked well. It was good.
And Tony asks, where is Alice now, and do you ever ride her?
Alice is in London, Kat is in York, and I'm in Oxford. But We do, and we've got plans, and we've just been buying some new tires today, some racing tires for her. So yeah, we
Wheels.
wheels and tires.
Yeah, the tires actually came with the wheels as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, we and wheels and cassettes. I know what we've been buying. Yeah, yeah, all of that. So yes, we will be taking her out.
Right, so
Yeah,
you've not forgotten. Not
no,
going to
definitely not.
the museum. Do you feel it's changed your life?
We're going to do something called Chase.
Sorry, Kat.
Sorry, it's a bit of delay. No, I was just going to say that we're going to ride something called Chase the Sun on Alice, which we're hoping will actually go ahead. It's a ride where you literally chase the sun, so it's kind of on the longest day, and you ride. It's 200 odd miles sort of across the country, and you go coast to coast, but quite a long coast to coast route, and you do it in the day. And so yeah, so we thought we'd do that on Alice. You know, if we ever get allowed out again, fingers crossed we do.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to keep on, but I'm just fascinated by the navigation side of things. I mean, had you got the routes all planned on a GPS and were following it on whatever Komoot or something, or did you have paper maps, hundreds of them, or road signs?
No, so what we did was we had, you know, we had the route obviously roughly done with Guinness that we had to submit. So we had a route planned, and what we would do is every day when so in the evening we'd say, right, where's the next place where we can stay, somewhere that's kind of more or less on the route, that's a minimum of 80 miles away. And we would work that out, and then we would plot a route using an app called Komoot generally, which tends to find you the hilliest route actually. And then we would plot that route for the day, and that's what we'd ride. So if there wasn't a place that was 80 miles, if the next place was 90 or 95, that's what we'd ride, and we'd know, you know, every day, right, okay, it's going to be 115 miles today, okay, you know, that means we've got to, you know, crack on really, and that's what we'd do.
Yeah.
Well, I think the whole thing is wonderful and inspirational, and thank you very much. And I know you must have given this talk several times. You make it, you know, your response is so pleasantly fresh and engaging. So thank you for, because it's all obviously novel to us. Thank you so much for making it all come alive.
No,
and so
thanks for having us.
Yeah,
thanks.
Hand over to Alison, our Cyclops chair, just to say thank you. And there was one thing you wanted to mention as well.
Yes. Well, hello, and thank you again from me as well, Kat and Raz, because that was quite breathtaking, and I think also please do everybody contribute to their charities, the Motor Neurone Disease Association and Oxfam, just to kind of recognise the time you've spent giving this talk. It's been great, thank you. I just wanted to mention that, very appropriately, being two women on a bike going around the world, that Joy Riders is coming to Oxford. And Joy Riders is an organisation that started in London in about 2017, when in Waltham Forest, to really get women who are not confident riding. And it's gone from strength to strength, particularly last year. And I was interested to see, Kat and Raz, that you were funded by This Girl Can, which is Sport England, or wasn't they sponsored you in some way? And this Girl Can has been the reason why Joy Riders is able to become Joy Riders Britain, not Joy Riders London. And so it's coming to Oxford. They've had some awareness raising days, but there's no need to have attended those. If you want to become a ride leader, please get in contact with me or get in contact with Annette Pattinson who lives in Headington, and we can point you to the right and in the right direction to get training to become a ride leader. We feel this is just such an opportunity in Oxford to really maybe target the communities which don't normally cycle, and we've also want to tie it into the celebration of cycling that we're beginning to plan, which will be in September, which will just be kind of when we're truly being unlocked, fingers crossed, that we can all get out and celebrate all cycling in all its wonderful forms in Oxford. So thank you again, and we will, I'm sure, be hearing more of you both.